one single item in common, and that was the talent. And the issue of talent, both the challenges are not only in cyber across the board, but especially in cyber. Most of us who are in this industry have to deal with it firsthand, and firsthand in the sense that we are hiring managers, we are leaders, we run businesses as well as support businesses. And in any of the roles you think about, this is one thread that cuts across everybody's kind of organization and department. For the last 3 days, we had a little bit of a recap of this at the roundtable in the morning. And what came out was that we need to be very, very creative and be very intentional as to how we increase our focus and force on cyber and expanding the outreach and expanding the acceptability, the relatability of cyber security with the common folks. I think this is, if it were 10 years back, I would have just probably, talked to the CIO or the C-suite members or some of the national security leaders have appreciated this. But now I think everybody does. Everybody sees the headlines, and I don't have to remind of, our support for the folks in Ukraine who are kind of struggling at this point. And as part of the support to UkraineNow.org, Cyber Future Foundation is seeing the first-hand impact of cyber issues. There is no ocean dividing us. That's one thing that we need to realize. As much as the physical boundaries exist to separate us, the digital boundaries do not. And we are seeing a relentless attack on our critical infrastructure, not only the energy sector, but also healthcare and many other areas. And it's not too far when this will become the way to go fast rather than kinetic. And it has been going hand in hand for a long time. So for the past 5 years, we have focused primarily on the leadership angle. As many of you know who have been part of CFF, that we are a platform for leaders. We are, business leaders, national security leaders, as well as law enforcement and many different areas. We embraced academia, and that's how the whole multi-stakeholder environment is built. The 5,000 members strong leadership needs probably 5 million cybersecurity talent, and 1.5 million job openings is a tip of that iceberg. In the last 3 days, we also kind of skimmed along the different stakeholders that are part of this cyber ecosystem. Most of them are technically focused, but a lot of that goes back to the roots of the cybersecurity as an industry. We are a very new industry compared to the millennium of innovation, technology, and all that's been going on. Cyber is a blip in that whole time scale, and I believe that is just growing. When we go from creating something to actually using something, I think the using angle gets more demonstrated. We talked about this morning. We talked about the kids spending more time on Twitch, on Discord, on the different channels. My son just loves to play Minecraft, as probably your daughter, and all of that coming together. I think we have to think about how can we make a more inclusive cyber narrative than we have today. It must be part of our life. As a cyber industry professional, I can tell you last 20 years I've spent in this without knowing I'll be where I am today. And most of our stories go like that. We traced through about 50 leadership stories in the last 3 days. And all those 50 leaders have had a very interesting ways coming to cyber. And, many of them actually tinkered and tinkered with things. They love to break things, as probably my friend Norma were here, and Diana, I see a lot of the friends here have broken things to build things. And I think that's how we learned best. And the double E major in me says, when you're stacking transformers plate by plate, and when you're going to regulate the temperature online, think about it. We take security for granted, the physical access for granted, but the digital access is never even thought about, right, to take granted. So I believe when we come together for the rest of the sessions here and those that are joining us online, please think in retrospect what we could do better. How can we expand the inclusivity of cyber, and how can we make sure that we are able to get more people excited into this? And it is not only the cybersecurity as a curriculum or cybersecurity as a principal domain. It needs to be pervasive. It needs to be across the board. And we talked about the meaning of CS, right? I mean, for a cybersecurity professional, a master's or a graduate degree in CS is cybersecurity master's. But for a computer science major, it's computer science. So maybe that's where we see how we can infuse cybersecurity the notion of security and the different aspects of it within the different disciplines. This transcends across the multiple disciplines that in the universities. Maybe schools don't need to have, and I say this with certain amount of kind of connotation of that can be taken in both ways. But maybe schools that are good in law, they actually infuse cyber into the law program, and that way they're able to get more more cyber oriented lawyers who can actually help us in this trend. And that applies to anything else. I mean, healthcare. We had a great session yesterday with David Guffrey and his entire team of medical device cybersecurity professionals, who all came back to this from different angles, but all had the healthcare in common. The same with the critical infrastructure session that we had the day before, which talked about how to secure power and utilities and infrastructure, critical infrastructure, using the engineers who are already in, serving the field. So I think we need to bring cyber to the different domains that are already established and utilize them. Then just be stand alone. We can do great things just as a profession, but our profession needs to influence other professions, and that's how we'll be secure. The other angle that I want to bring in, which we have kind of meticulously tried to get into our leadership forums, is the creative ways to get to talent. And I think I have to recognize Karinda here and Jen here, because they are my new friends. I have a lot of friends, and they are the ones who are bringing and exposing us to a whole new stream of talent. And you can think about the hundreds of thousands of refugees. I'll tell you that story because I think that is not so much known and appreciated in the industry as such. But you have generations of the communities who have come in here as refugees and have become very successful at what they do. And in the last 6 months, I've got exposed to so many different creative and talent. And in fact, I have to appreciate Meena, who joined us, maybe 60 days after she landed in the US, and she's doing so well. And now with the Ukrainian influx, the way I knew Ukraine and Ukrainian talent was primarily through AI. I mean, our engineers were Ukrainian engineers. They're in Lviv, they're in all the other places like Kiev and all the other niche places which did really well in AI. So the opportunities are endless. So I think as we kick off this today's session and go into tomorrow a little bit broader, today we'll focus on a few angles. One of them is, what are the ecosystem attributes that are available to us? We discussed it in the last, I think, 30 sessions in the last 3 days. But distilling it down to what ecosystem players should we consider? It's not just the broad-based academia and industry and public sector. I think that's pretty broad. Let's narrow it down to which components could be utilized in what way, right? And at CFF, as you know, we'll raise the hand to actually bring them together virtually in person. Second is, we will look at specific examples. I'm glad Greg Cobb, my good friend, is here, and he'll share with him and Nick as to what their learning journey is. And I think Greg's learning journey would have probably been so different than what Nick's is going to be. And let's leverage every aspect of resource we have. The third thing that I would highlight, and I think we'll get into a little bit here today, is the different resources that we have in terms of making actionable progress. Some of them are metrics that we talked about a little bit of metrics in the morning, and having Rodney Peterson from NICE in the morning. He'll be there tomorrow to speak with us. I think we need to identify and hone on specific metrics that we can measure on. I mean, again, I'm an engineer, but more business person for the last decades. I think without metrics, we don't know what to do. And metrics should not be for just for being metrics. I think we should identify key leading indicators that we can invest in, and talent being one of them. Definitely look at it. And how can we deconstruct that whole talent piece and bring together the specific components, streamline and structure them. Another angle that we'll probably miss here today, but probably bring tomorrow into the agenda, is the whole recruitment angle. We delved into it a little bit yesterday with Lynn Monahan from Beyond Trust, talking about how does recruitment work, deconstructing the processes, how can we make sure we can put not only produce good talent, but also streamline their way to get into the industry. And each of you, I think, in this particular forum, you represent a particular segment of that or piece of the puzzle that will bring it together. As we go into the next session, I want you to think through some of these. Please share questions online. We are doing this literally as we turned the whole virtual program, and with the generosity of GMU, we are able to get a grand place that we have turned into our small meeting room. But please participate as much as possible. All of this content is going to be available online, and we will go through these sessions today, and we'll look forward to collaborate with you as we go forward. This is just the beginning. And as I said, there are a lot of programs happening around cybersecurity, but I believe there's a big gap in the cyber talent world, and we got to bring it together. I'm getting introduced to cyber talent, not necessarily cyber talent, but talent and workforce leaders every day. And, having spent almost 20 years in cyber, I'm surprised that we didn't tap into that. So we'll have some really great, talented leaders today. Our next panel, or the first panel of the day, we're going to kick off with 3 great experts. So please pay attention to every word they say, but also give your ideas and share and discourse as we go in online. I'm going to invite to this forum and for this particular panel. Let's start with Catherine Gromberg, our good friend from Night Dragon. Please come on up. I think they're going to get you mic'd up. And Paul Tortoro is just brand new into the office of a brand new office of National Cyber Directorate. And my new good friend, hopefully, yes, Deborah Wasden from Markle Institute. We're going to talk about the different components or ecosystem that are there, and basically take this as the first, I think, foundation for some of the strategic pieces that we need to put together. So with this, please welcome the speakers here. I'll let them introduce themselves. And, I think we'll have a fantastic session ahead. So thank you.
I guess I'll go first. Hello, everybody. I'm Catherine Gromberg, and I work for Night Dragon, which is a venture capital platform that focuses on cybersecurity, security, safety, and privacy technologies run by Dave DeWalt, who is the former CEO of FireEye and McAfee and other companies. It's such a pleasure to be here. We have a great longstanding relationship with Cyber Future Foundation and Val and all the great work that you're doing. We're just happy to be along for the ride and try to help in ways that we can. As a venture firm, we're of course focused on the evolution of technology, but we're equally passionate about the evolution of how we approach our human workforce and cyber workforce development. And then especially how we can take innovations in technology to assist on the other side, so that they're running in parallel. So my background is that I've come from the cybersecurity world. I've worked for companies like Forescout and CrowdStrike, but I'm also an educator. So this is an issue that allows me to unite the two sides that I really haven't done before. I've taught graduate level courses at Georgetown and now Rice University. So it's really a great topic for me, and I'm just glad to be part of this amazing panel.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm Paul Tortoro. I'm the very new Deputy Assistant National Cyber Director for Workforce Education and Training. I've just come on board this week, so I was told to go talk on a panel. But in my previous life, actually in my other life, I'm detailed to them for a little bit. I'm actually the director of the Naval Academy Center for Cybersecurity Studies, where we created a cyber science program. Cyber science and cybersecurity are mandatory for every student, no matter what. But we sought one of the first ABET accreditations, along with NSA CAE accreditations for our program. So I do also have a deep background in the academics of cyber and bringing on new programs. And so when I was asked can I help do that on a national level, I jumped at the opportunity as long as I could go back after a short period of time. So I'm actually, since I do work for a Navy Admiral, he said you can spend 4 days at the White House, but spend 1 day at Annapolis. So and when I do actually still engage with my students at the Naval Academy, especially those in the cyber field. They're, as many of you know, they're energetic, whether they're wearing a uniform or not. And so talking to them, those midshipmen, about the wonderful opportunities that they'll have in their careers, both inside and outside of uniform, is just great for me. So every opportunity I can go back to Annapolis and talk to those young men and women, as well as advocate for those that maybe not want to be a cyber expert, but because they want to fly, but that knowing a bit about cyber is going to help them be a better pilot, a better Marine Corps officer, a better SEAL. And so that's a great aspect of my job. And so now I'm going to take this and assist the National Cyber Director in his new position, Mr. Chris Inglis. How can we maybe do this a bit more on a national level? And we'll talk more about that during today. And apparently I'm on a panel tomorrow too. So, so tune in tomorrow if I don't get.
Good morning, good afternoon. Debbie Wasden. I work for the Markle Foundation. And we're a foundation that has historically invested in the nation's sort of most pressing needs, with a long history in tackling topics like national security, and have spent the last 8 years really zoning in on the role of skills-based practices to open up talent and opportunity for workers across America. When the pandemic hit, we developed an initiative called the Rework America Alliance, which brought together over 40 national organizations to serve as a backbone in really defining what constitutes a good job and how can we support the talent ecosystem to enable workers, particularly workers of color, to be able to access not just any job, but a good job and be able to have opportunity throughout their careers. My expertise and background has long been on the demand side of the talent equation. I serve mostly as a translator from understanding what employers, largely corporate America, need in terms of talent, particularly in emerging fields, and how can we utilize that voice to support change and alignment, but really what can employers be doing to take action to better support opening up opportunity and alignment for workers. In my previous role, I worked for many years at an organization at the intersection of CEOs and university presidents, and helped create many new cyber programs across the country. I've worked really closely with Virginia, George Mason, University System of Maryland, and many others to really think about how do you align industry's needs to the skills and training and education that we're delivering for students, particularly in an area so critical like cyber.
Excellent. I mean, that's a phenomenal background. I think we need more from you, and also, get ready to raise up a new army of cyber workers. Hopefully, that'll come together. Maybe we'll, Catherine, maybe start with you. Recently you have made especially Night Dragon has made a lot of investment in the edutech area, right? I spoke to Dan Rigdor from 5DX and Human from others. What is the commercial angle here? And from a business standpoint, I think it has to be commercially viable and scalable so that we can take more people and put them in real careers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many commercial aspects of it, and first off, we should think about kind of a little ironically the way that we create more human talent is to leverage the technology we have. Technology is not going to solve all of our problems. We see that, we know that in some ways it creates like major complexities as we see tool proliferation, and it gets very complicated for organizations, and then they need more humans, more talented humans, and there's only so much that can be automated at the end of the day. We need talent in many, many areas. We need creativity. So technology, we're really excited about that. We're used to selling technology that solves like network problems. You deploy something to the network. But here, technology is going to enable the growth of our talent pool, which is very, very badly needed. And we really do see every unfilled cyber position. In most cases, we're talking defensive, but we could say offensive, I suppose, as well, for government purposes, as a real national security problem. And I happen to work for a particular type of venture capital company that cares very deeply about those problems. Dave has a long history of participating really actively in government conversations like through NSTAC, where I would just remind everybody that Moonshot really, of course, looked at the cyber workforce and education problem. And that was in 2018. And that felt late to the game. So there is a way to leverage technology, but sort of from the larger perspective, to think about the economics that drive people to the outcomes that we want. And one thing I would note is that, and I'm sure Deborah can elaborate on this, is that companies struggle with this problem of filling seats and filling talent, and they pay a lot of money. So it feels to us that there are inefficiencies in this whole system. And so we're really starting to think about, well, how can we leverage technology to create a kind of marketplace that would eliminate some of the latency and the cost and the inefficiencies that exist in the system today? It shouldn't be so hard for students to find the right program for them. There are lots of programs, but to find the right one, and then potentially to at the end of that program, to have an employer that's ready to take them in, right? And maybe that is sort of preset and pre-negotiated. And then maybe that employer could subsidize part of that student's education. But none of that can happen in an efficient way. It couldn't before, but now there are technologies that would enable that kind of an interaction. And we can solve some of those problems. So we're sort of excited about the technology for technology's sake to enable the growth of our talent pool, but also its ability to look at the ways that a technology platform unites suppliers and consumers. So we see that as being perfectly applicable here, and we think that that's what Thrive DX does and can do more of. And I think that from the government side, and we're looking forward to having all these kinds of conversations with our government partners, but we think the government can encourage that a lot more too. It doesn't all just have to be government subsidies for sort of the traditional programs that we've seen, although those are great. I think we can look for new and creative ways to encourage that public-private partnerships in the ways that we're doing really elsewhere in cybersecurity. This administration has done really, really cool and incredible things to bring together the private sector and the government stakeholders. And so it should be no different for cyber education and workforce development.
Absolutely, great deal. No, thank you. Paul, sir, let me flip to you in terms of, I know beyond Director English asking and taking up this position, you must have a vision for how to take this position and actually expand on the mandate of creating cyber workforce, right? So your thoughts on that, so just a foundation of this, of your role.
So definitely, if you're not familiar with the National Cyber Director, it's a new position, and Chris Inglis is the right person to lead it at the right time, given his background in this space. But he's given out four strategic some principles that I'm taking in my role to the workforce. One is championing federal coherence. So as I look around the landscape, and some of you may already know this, there are various programs within the federal government, whether they're grants, they're programs, they're scholarship for service. There's a whole number of entities, CAEs, you name it. And there are about 28 that have been, at least I've identified in my 5 days in the job. So how can I provide coherence? I think I'm old enough that I was young when President Reagan was in office, and he appointed me to the Naval Academy. So I'll use a quote from him. I think he used to call it the 9 most feared words in the English language, or I'm from the government, I'm here to help. So we're not here to create another 29th effort. It's to how do we find this federal cohesiveness? How do we guide the best practices? I heard you talking about earlier about statistics, right? Maybe some of the statistics and metrics are, these are working, these are adding to the problem, or they're taking away from the problem. How do we meet these 500,000 or more cyber vacancies, and what are good metrics? So some of my job will be, how do we develop this federal cohesiveness and collecting data? The other one is improving public-private partnerships and collaboration in this space. And so for me, it's in the workspace. And so I'm glad to have these partners up here with me, and maybe some of you in the group, is how do we do that? How do we make that pipeline that's not a government pipeline or an industry pipeline or a banking pipeline, but it's a cyber pipeline that allows people to move back and forth more freely, The other one is then aligning resources to aspirations, which kind of goes with that. We don't have an indefinite source of resources, so we got to make sure that we're using them well. And the last one is increasing present and future resilience by creating a better cyber workforce. And so how I interpret that is a model that I use at the Naval Academy that I'm going to use for the nation if he lets me is all, many, few, where everyone's getting some level of cyber awareness. So how do I reach out to K through 12, to my parents, to your parents, to everyone across America, just to raise their awareness about cyber or digital hygiene, if you want to call it, but everyone's awareness needs to be raised. That's the all. The many is those of us that are, maybe you're not on the, you're not a cyber skilled person, but you need to have better awareness. Maybe you're the guy that's installing cable, or the person that's procuring equipment. Maybe you need better awareness of what goes on in the field. So that's the many. And the few is obviously who we're here to talk about, is the cyber skilled workforce, which, depending on what you look at, it's 500 to 600,000 vacancies, which is probably a soft number when you think about it. So I've been given a task by Director Inglis, since he was in the Air Force and I was in the Navy, he's given me quick guidance to go out and see what you can find out and see if you can develop and propose a national strategy for the workforce education, training, and development. So as I do that, events like this, I can find and collect information as what should go into a strategy that's going to increase a national level of awareness, those that need to know more about what's going on in the cyber world so they can do a better job, and those few that we need to target, but also to allow reskilling and upskilling depending on what the individual wants. So they can, Chris's quote, not mine, but I really like it. It's what he calls aspiration to destination. If you want to change your career, you don't really care for it, but you really would love to get into forensics. Well, let's find a way to get you there. So, so my task is, it's not an easy or simple one, but it's one I think that we've been talking about. I mentioned the moonshot, which I was part of that a little bit. So we've been looking at how do we address this? And so now there's a new national cyber director who he likes to call himself the coach. Yeah. There's a lot of players on the field. And so my job is maybe the offensive coordinator, that I'm going to see if I can get the right teams, and the defensive coordinator to see if I can get the right training. So my challenge is actually in the next couple of months is can we develop a national strategy? And so I'll start actually putting pen to paper, maybe having discussions with more groups, virtual and in person, to see what are the ideas that are working and not working, and then how do we become here to help and not to make you afraid of the government.
Oh, that's a big pitch and a great goal. Thank you for that. Debbie, you want to talk about the journey basically? And I think, what I'm curious about is how can we apply your learning in what you've done at scale here in cyber, and your thoughts.
I think for me, the recommendation and the area of opportunity that we have today, particularly with Paul and Chris, and the desire to have a shared vision and alignment, is around leaning in around that many category. Mm-hmm. And that many is not there aren't hard guardrails in there. It's a spectrum of who requires cyber skills. What does that look like? And how are employers recognizing these skills in their hiring and decision-making processes? I was thinking today, cyber is unique. In the last 10 to 15 years, this is a sector across an area that has tremendous progress and investment. I mean, you're going to hear from Rodney tomorrow, but NIST is a unique framework. The NSA CAE designations and the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, where the government has effectively been able to have higher ed respond to show how they're staying cutting edge and find value in that. Other things like George Mason brought together a whole lot of employers to understand what their needs were in the area and build industry-engaged programs and align to cyber. And to your question, why are we not feeling more progress? I think is an interesting and nuanced question, because it isn't that we are making progress in areas of cyber, whether they're siloed and need to be aligned and recognized? I think that's a big question. You're seeing emerging ed tech providers and training providers and all folks that in the private sector that feel like they can be supportive and aligned. But you're not necessarily seeing the universal change in the approach by employers to recognize the diverse talent pipelines and change their practices to open up opportunities for different candidates. And I think that going outside the lines, so we have in some ways tried and true programs. They could probably be better. We could have more. We need to make sure they're super relevant for the few and that those individuals are cultivated and supported. But in the many category, what are the jobs that require cyber skills? How are those articulated? And how are those, that defined set of skills recognized in the hiring and promotion process for millions of Americans who would not consider cyber as their primary function? And then how do we then translate that to our education and training providers? Mm-hmm. And how do we support workers to be able to articulate that they now have skills that employers are looking for? I think for me, the big takeaway to share is that things like the NIST framework exist. I kind of call it like a decoder ring. It's like they are a common language framework, that it does exist. But they need to be utilized by employers in their hiring, recruitment, onboarding, promotion practices. They need to be utilized in the translation of education training programs so that that alignment of the system can actually function with some sense of efficiency.
That is very true. And in fact, you just kind of repeated the statement we had in the morning. I'm sure that cyber has to do something with it. That, in my personal role, I have built about 200 cyber programs for about 140 CISOs in the last 6 years. And not a single time we actually implemented NICE. And that was a hard thing to say in front of Rodney in the morning, but it is true. And the last one I tried, they were delighted. I mean, there was a method to it. There's a sustainable method and structure that you can actually continue on. And I think we will get back to that point definitely and deal a little bit better. Paul, so if I may go back to you, in terms of, you definitely have a very ambitious goal. As you know, we do have, with this talent week also, we had a very ambitious goal. We have to get there to make baby steps. What are the first few steps you think you are kind of thinking of taking, and how can we help? I mean, how do we collaborate to support you?
So one thing, and we'll probably have some, Mr. Ingalls will probably have some level of a summit, probably in the next couple of months, to bring in key stakeholders from industry, academia, as well as the federal government, and then look at what needs to be changed to allow more people into the cyber field. Mm-hmm. Maybe we need to, I've already seen some ideas, maybe we need for the government now, an apprenticeship program. Maybe that's going to lead someone to find better skills, because there are examples in other fields. So why not find this one? There's a challenge that exists if you go to a community college or maybe a non-traditional path. Some of the government jobs aren't necessarily open for you because they require a bachelor's degree and experience. So maybe we find a way, since we can now from the National Cyber Director, find other alternative ways that's a non-traditional pathway, at least for the federal government, to get into that space. So we'll probably have a summit with key stakeholders, hopefully in the next month or so. Obviously, we can't get everyone in the room, but we'll probably have a virtual dialogue. I will have a virtual dialogue, as will Chris Inglis, about what are the things that are working, what's not working, what can we do from our perch to execute change. And so one of them is actually some recommendations from the Cyberspace Solarium Commission and other research, is that there probably needs some level of a governance structure from that Chris chairs that looks at all the different efforts and what can we change and what can we make change. And so some of it will be a dialogue that I will start here very shortly on finding out what's working for industry, academia. I've talked to Rodney as well about the NICE framework and why aren't more people using it. But if you see other elements within the federal government, they have their own tracks that they're following. So one is to find what's working, what's not working, and then obviously have a strategy that's going to have some teeth, that's going to actually have meaningful value, not just something that's going to sit on a shelf, maybe some level of executive order or something that's going to give us the ability to actually manage programs. Those that are working well, encourage them. Those that aren't working well, either find what to do to make them better. So the first couple months will be a dialogue, discussion, and then ideally I'll probably have some working groups over the summer on the different aspects of what could go into the strategy. Very simplistically, maybe it's a level of all, many, few.
Sure.
Neither of those have finite endpoints where all and many and few begin and end, but there are different levels of what we need to approach. My goal obviously would be to maybe look at keenly at the federal work sector, but the broader work sector, we want to keep the people going in and out of the federal government with the ability to come back. So even in the Navy, I know it's hard to leave. If you have a family issue, you want to leave and come back. It's getting better, but it's very hard to do. So federal government, same thing. The civilian industry sector would love to have some of the skills that the Navy and Cyber Command have, but can you provide better on-ramps and off-ramps? And so there's discussion, can you move between departments and agencies easier, especially if they're not using the same skills-based hiring? So there is a lot of work to be done. Fortunately, this is one of those areas where I don't think we're going to find much negativity, right? Let's solve this, right? I think this is one that's not political, and it's a worthwhile venture, not just for the federal government, but for the nation. So there is a lot of work. I have a limited time, so everyone work with me to finish this.
I'm sure, and I think they mentioned about that we are not seeing progress, or maybe we are making progress, but you're not seeing it, right? So I think with you having the convening power for NCD will definitely help there. To assemble us in a more structured way. So thank you for taking on that challenge. So Catherine, maybe next question to you is about, in technology industry, we typically try to automate things. And then in this space, especially around talent, we talk about people. And people in automation have a little bit of tough journey, historically, right? People think automation is taking jobs away and all that. So with your background and as broad as it is, how do you expect us to be getting ready to, embrace automation, but also, support digital transformation, but also getting people in to do the work,
Well, I mean, one of the things that makes the cybersecurity industry so vibrant is that everybody wants to come work in it. And so we kind of have this a little bit of a weird disconnect. That's where I kind of reference, we see sort of things breaking down a little bit because every student should want to work in cybersecurity. We see a lot of, us older folks who started out in covering issues like counterterrorism or law enforcement. And now here I am in cybersecurity. So at some level, we all are attracted to the industry. It's so vibrant and wonderful. And, it's automation, and, we're clearly with some exceptions, but automation is not itself a problem because the industry is going to continue to evolve such that talent can move on and do more creative jobs inside of if we're talking about the industry and how we create technology in Silicon Valley, skilled people are going to move into the more creative parts of that. Just like in government, we talk about, being able to bring in automation in order to eliminate the mundane jobs and let people move into the things that require far more expertise and creativity and looking at sort of emerging TTPs and really trying to understand the adversary, moving them into these areas that really do demand talent. Certainly that base training, but then further developing that talent. But what I would say that's kind of most exciting is, and I think with regard to kind of this discussion we've been having about public-private partnership and how we motivate the sides to come together, and it really shouldn't be political. I don't think it will be. But I think that people are going to need to be willing to change some things on both sides. The government has done certain things in certain ways. We hand out grants in certain ways, but maybe we should rethink some of those things in order to incentivize some of the stakeholders, be they employers and in terms of how we tax employers, but also grant recipients in the university systems to incentivize them, firstly, to come to the table but then potentially to change some of their behaviors. For example, not every university offers cybersecurity training. And so why do the students at that university, they have to go seek it elsewhere? And again, it comes back to making it easy and desirable for students to gain that training, and then to know that there's going to be a company that's well suited to them based on the training that they had. So again, there are synergies on both sides. What I'd like to see come out of the future process, I think everybody is looking forward to, and this group has an amazing opportunity to convene all of those stakeholders, is to come back to this question of challenges. We loved that in the Moonshot Grand Challenges, where constructively and politely we kind of challenge each other. I think we're on the industry side. We expect government to kind of challenge us and say, what are you guys going to do? Are you going to invest more in training, just inside of your own selves, but also maybe contributing more of your content to a shared marketplace, making it more available, not trying to just solve all the same problems in silos. Let's try to solve them together and be a little less concerned about maybe some of the competitive aspects, because as we all know, companies compete fiercely for talent.
Absolutely.
And in some cases, companies' strategies for recruiting talent is just poaching from other companies. And that's a concern, right? So how do you get people to come to a marketplace when they're concerned, well, I'm going to train this person, then they're going to go to another company. But again, those are some of the weird sort of glitches and inefficiencies that potentially we can all address together if we're being honest, if we come honestly to the discussion. So I do love this issue of challenges, and I think at least I can speak for us at Night Dragon, we're ready. We want to be challenged. We would love to maybe sort of lead the side of things that are the innovation side, challenge us to create even more innovation around this challenge. It's not just, oh, we've got ed tech, we've got a cool platform. What else? What else can we really drive some innovation around? I think that would be very exciting for us.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I love the concept of challenge, because I think, especially in the cyber industry and on the commercial side, competitiveness matters. So if you throw us something, we'll make sure that we get it done. Great deal. I want to come back to you, Debbie, around the workforce side. One thing that we all struggle with from a cyber industry is everybody's stressed out, burnt out, and each person who's capable of doing the job is doing 3 or 4 person's job, and they still do it. And that's why I think we have a tough time to get people out of their day jobs to assimilate. And also, and I'm teeing this up for you, Paul, that getting cyber leaders and cyber practitioners engaged on a continuous basis is something that we need, but the luxury that we don't have. And how do you see when a workforce development program or the scale and capacity you're looking at, Debbie, your experience from workforce building, how do you creatively think we can solve that problem?
I think we're in a moment of time where CEOs of all our BRT companies, all our large employers, recognize the need for diversifying their workforce and understanding how can they look for hidden talent in new ways. That's not just for cyber, but we're no longer in a place where we need to elevate that issue to be a C-level conversation. The need and the passion and the ROI for changing talent practices exists. So you have them at the table.
Sure.
You still lack some of the ability to translate that into internal practice change. And you still largely see it on the periphery. There's emerging cyber apprenticeship programs on the private side to try to find different talent pools. But I think diversity is a lever that CEOs are thinking about and passionate about, and thinking about how do we diversify our cyber workforce and recognizing that if we continue to do the same things, we are not going to be successful in diversifying our cyber talent workforce. So that may require removing degree requirements.
Mhm.
And that is a more complicated thing in OPM. So I am so glad that you are willing to take on that challenge. I'm like, that is amazing. But on the private side, the majority of employers are not bound by those government contracts. There are many in the aerospace, in the defense contractors that are, but the majority of employers are not.
Mhm.
And so when they stop and think, can I remove barriers? Can I start opening it up for more, looking to different ways, thinking about different training programs? Can we think about if a student or a pipeline of students came with 80% of the skills I require, would I be willing to onboard them and upskill them because I'm able to identify them early and excite them and bring them in? So to answer the question, there is passion and ROI on changing the way that employers do business. That is there, but the devil's in the details. And thinking about how do you approach diversifying your cyber talent pool so that you have a much broader group of individuals who are moving from that all many to few, right? But that front end needs to be opened up and diversified. And I think you have the support of those leaders, but it has to be you have to say it differently. It can't sound like the same conversation, because if we have the same conversation, you're going to end up with the same results.
Yeah.
It has to be now about how do we think about our talent practices differently? How do we approach this from a place of diversity and opening up opportunity to individuals who haven't been able to access cyber jobs previously, and start from there and think about how we can move those folks in so that we can move them up.
Great point. I think, absolutely relevant probably in terms of a C-suite view of what key issues and risks you are dealing with, and how do we address that, and how do we make sure the business opportunities realize. And I should probably put a plug here for our friend here, Anthony Hannon, and also for the CEO, Action for Asia Equity. If we can do this for DEI, I think people understand. In the boardrooms, there are only a few things now people are thinking about, of course, the VAR, and then the several supply chain issues we have, but cyber, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the many risks that we have associated with the particular business of supply chain. I think these three issues, if we can take the collective angle for that and the learning from that, I believe we can do that. So thank you for the idea. Paul, I'll move next to you in terms of putting some of the plans that you have to action. And you talked about the roundtable, the getting people, our working groups and summits and all together. What are you thinking in terms of the initial kind of highlights or initial topics you want to tackle on? Because cyber is extremely broad, and there are policy angles and there are technology angles and all. How can we add voice to any specific topics you have that we could kind of address first?
I think we mentioned at both ends. It's what are the barriers to not just government, but to also just industry, and some of it is diversity, equity, inclusion. Is every American should have this opportunity, right? So some of this can't go into strategy, but it's the skill is not the commodity, the human being, right? We need to have a culture that welcomes anybody. Hey, I have the ability to have competitions that can reach out to everyone in America. That has, there's a new broadband initiative by the government. So now we can have ways that everyone can actually get on to capture the flag. And so if they like it, then they get to the next level. And then all of a sudden, I get a little inbox alert. Hey, there's a guy in Peoria or gal that loves this. And so we have the ability to get this out there, because my first part of my life was in nuclear submarines, and not everyone wants to do that. Probably not many in this room. But you have to find the right person that has that wants to do it. And now women are also on those submarines. So if you went on a submarine now, you'd see a snapshot of America. Now it's a very small snapshot, but we have to find the right people, get out to everyone. And so in the cyber world, just be aware that the skill is not the commodity, it's the human, right? So how do we create a culture that they're going to want to be part of? And so I can't write that into strategy, but that's for those that are leading people. Really, how do you create that culture that wants them to stay in this job and keep progressing? For those that want to come into under my military hat, the things that we can do in the cyber domain, you can't do legally outside of the government. So that's how one of the way we say, hey, look what we can do that you can't do anywhere else legally, except in Russia, maybe. Yeah. But that's a culture of, hey, I'm doing something great. And so that does translate. That doesn't answer your question, but I think we overlook that it's the human being, right? How do we encourage them to want to be in this field and then stay in the field? Or maybe I've got a great friend. He's in his 20s. He got his business degree, and he reached out to me about a year ago. Hey, what's my roadmap to get into cyber? I'm like, oh boy, go to these 15 different websites. But I was able to, I'm using him as an example of maybe we help create a roadmap. Yeah. There are a couple, I think CISA has good information on their webpage, but maybe there's another way to say, are you interested in the cyber world? Click on something, and it takes you to that aspiration to destination that we talked about. And so that's hard to put in a strategy, but I want everyone that's in this, I think we're all in the same boat here together, literally, is how do we encourage that individual that maybe has a cultural barrier when they're 12 that stops them from, because you can't do that. That's not right for you. And so how do we get down to that lowest level so that every American can enjoy the benefits of this new digital society? And if they want to be part of the solution, we're going to help them. We're going to encourage them to do that at any point in their life, wherever they come from across America. So that's hard to put words into a strategy. But I think everyone should advocate that as one of the things we're going to try to do as a group. So I didn't answer your question, but you gave me the floor. So I've just seen it when I talk to people and they say, why didn't you get into cyber? Well, it really wasn't for me. And I'll pull the string. Well, why wasn't it for you? And maybe it was a cultural barrier. Maybe it didn't have access to the internet, or maybe someone just told them you'll never be good. Well, that's
all of the above. And we have heard every bit of that in the last 3 days. Yeah, we had students and candidates who had their own stories of why they got into cyber, but pulled out, or they had to be reeled back in. So you did answer my question in the sense of how can we get there, right? So thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much of the time, but I think that's one of the things that I'm going to be on my soapbox, whether it's in a strategy or not, is having the ability to communicate as you should, is that this is a great field. There are opportunities. If you go into industry, you can make a lot of money. If you go into the cyber command NSA, you can do some very interesting things. But it's meaningful work that's going to make the nation proud and make you a beneficiary of this, and so you can all pass that along. I can't. If you can help me figure out how to put that into strategy, I'll do it.
Well, I'm glad you asked me. I'm sure there will be many here who are jumping on the opportunity. Well, we started a little bit late, so I'll give you another 5 minutes. How about a few questions? I'm sure there are many. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the interesting panel. My name is Eric Miller, and one of the things that interests me a lot is the notion of looking at talent from abroad. So I represent a group in Honduras, which is building out a technical center, which essentially is putting kids through an English language program and then a 15-month program so that they will be able to come out and do the kind of 75% of the baseload work that you would want to have, and charge, frankly, companies 25 to 30% of the cost. And so part of this process is finding a way to onboard trusted companies, trusted suppliers, trusted institutions abroad, because I've been paying attention to cyber for 10 years, and it's still the same 500,000 job openings, give or take. It goes up a little bit, or it goes down a little bit. And we have the president's strategy on trying to stop migration out of Central America, which we're involved with. You have the nearshoring movement as companies move out of China. So how about thinking about integrating trusted partners abroad as a way of being a force multiplier to filling those gaps?
Oh, good question. Who wants to take that?
I'll take a small step. So it's so not just the abroad, but there are people in the United States who actually can't get a clearance either for various reasons, and so they're also limited from getting a federal job. So I do have a small piece. It doesn't answer your question necessarily, but I'm also looking at that's another barrier that some folks say, even if you're at a CAE school and so you're on the NSA track, but you're foreign born or your parents are foreign born or you've got dual citizenship, you may not get that job at NSA. So I've already heard that this week. I've been talking to several community colleges in the local area who have a very diverse population. And they said one of the challenges actually was the clearance issue. And so I can't answer the Honduras piece, but I can say at least from my side, I've already found there are US citizens who have that challenge. And so I don't know if I can just swipe and just make that go away, but there are probably other things that we can do to at least help those that don't have a clearance. So I don't think I answered your question, but I can answer the small piece that I've already seen from my just week on the job about US citizens that have the same problem. I'll turn over to.
Well, I would just note, and I don't know if it's a conclusion per se, but what you're saying reminds me a little bit of what I've been reading a lot about, which is a lot of young people in outside of the U.S. in countries who have access to the internet are making money or finding ways to make money in gaming. And I just find that whole phenomenon very interesting. It's also a little, I mean, it gets you into sort of the issue of cryptocurrency because that's how they get paid and the risk in that for them. And I just wonder, given your comments, like I'd much rather that those folks with that kind of skill be trained in the kind of cyber jobs that we need, whether they fill jobs in the United States or elsewhere. And of course we want, jobs first to go to US citizens. However, aren't there 3 million jobs in the world? I think something 2.7 is what ISC Squared has estimated. So it's like, I'm not sure we're in a sort of competitive mode. I would rather those people be gaining the kinds of skills to be on the good side of cyber than the bad side. And maybe those folks, and I don't have facts to back this up, but it seems to me that they're chasing the opportunity to make money, which is great and desirable. And yet our industry could offer them that. It's just that we haven't figured out a way to match those, that pool with some level of need. I feel like it could be done. I feel like maybe you're doing that. But I would say in contrast to what I'm reading about gaming, I would much rather it be the latter than the former.
Absolutely.
I would say just really quickly, I think you have an uphill climb if you're trying to place these individuals in traditional cyber jobs in the US, because they're not going to get cleared, and the framework of needing a clearance is very important. But as I mentioned, the range of cyber roles in this country far exceeds just the government roles and the traditional roles that require a clearance. So there are cyber adjacent roles that those skills are very valuable, and I would say that you may want to consider broadening the skills and the training to include digital credentials, data-driven decision-making, data science and analytics, cloud, because if you sort of broaden the cross-cutting sort of emerging skills piece of it, the first thing that somebody thinks about when you say cyber, it tends to be unclearable.
Yeah, but I think there are other inroads to that,
Exactly.
not necessarily the federal government jobs, but industry is a little bit opening up to having those alternative career options. But this has been a fascinating discussion. I'm glad, and then now probably why we had to split the two panels into two, because this discussion has to continue on until we settle on at least an initial agenda for our cyber strategy and the different components that make it happen. But I can't thank you enough for coming up and doing this panel with me. I'm really excited to see how we can take into some of these actionable items. And thank you again. Please hang out here. We'll have another really great discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.